Good evening, guys. We're at the forge today. We're going to work on blanket pins. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so blanket pins were something that were quite often used in the 17 and 1800s. And basically what they're used for is exactly what the name says. You can use your blanket, if you carry a wool blanket, as outerwear when you're trekking, you're out scouting around or sitting around a campfire. So I'm going to show you some blanket pins that I made in the past, and then we'll get to today's project. So there's quite a few variations that you can do, but they all basically serve the same purpose. So this blanket pin here is just a typical round pin, and it has a movable pin. So how you use it is you punch it through your blanket, and I'll show you this a little bit later in the video, and then you fold it over and you would roll your blanket around like this, and it'll hold your blanket in place. So that's a straightforward blanket pin. As far as for multifunction of this, I mean, you could use this as an awl. That's hardened metal, so no problem with that whatsoever. A second option and style that I made is this type. Now this is actually an old file, so it's high carbon steel, so I get real good sparks off this edge. So I have a striker for flint and steel, and I also have a blanket pin, and I also have an awl. So that's another variation of blanket pins. So I'm going to go over, get the forge heated back up, and we'll start this project. Alright guys, so what I chose today to do is I had an old file laying around the forge here. So I'm actually going to make a striker slash blanket pin with this. Now sometimes I run into a little bit of problem in the past when I'm drawing out this end. It seems to be a little bit more brittle because it's a file. So I got to just make sure it's nice and hot. And what I'm going to do to start is draw this end out, round it, and then we'll start curving it. So I'll get that started, do a little bit of video of that, and then we'll get back to you after I do that, and we'll show you the rounding process to get the circle. So stay with me as we work through this. Alright guys, so we rounded out the back end of our file, and I put a little twist on the end, and that's actually going to hold our pin on from sliding on and off. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to heat this back up, and we're going to bend it back over so we have our circle shape. Once we do that, we'll make our cross pin and be all finished up with it. Alright guys, so as we're continuing to heat that up, I got another piece of scrap metal that I have, and that's going to be the actual pin, part of this blanket pin. So I'm going to continue to bend this so I get a nice round shape out of it. As you can see, get a pretty good shape to that. Make sure it's nice and flat and leveled out now. And then we're going to actually work on our pin. For the pin, basically all you need to do is make sure it's long enough to fit across your piece. You're going to flatten one end out and point the other. So that's a pretty straightforward part of this project. So you can tell we're doing pretty good with that for now. We're going to leave it how it is, just like that. And we're going to start working on our actual pin. So how we're going to do this, like I said, we're going to draw out one end. This is actually an old Allen wrench. We're going to draw out one end, and then the other end we're going to flatten. So I'm going to do that, and we'll get right back to you. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so we finished the pin part of the blanket pin, and as you can see, I pointed one end and I flattened out the other. And the flat end we're actually going to reheat and going to bend that around the pin. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to throw this in the water so I can hold it with my hand, and we're going to use pliers to actually bend the pin around here. So we're going to just quickly cool this. Ultimately, when this is done, we're going to harden that file a little bit better so we get good sparks off it, and I can show you that in an upcoming video. So we're going to heat this end. I'm going to come up close. We're going to bend it around. So just stick with us here for a second till I get that heated up. And we should be pretty good to go. I'm actually going to heat this 2 times, guys. The first time we're going to make a U shape out of the back of the metal, and then the second time we're actually going to close it around. We'll try to get a close-up when we're closing it around. So it's not going to take too long to heat up because we already had it pretty hot and our fire's been cooking for a few hours now. So as you can see, I made a U shape. I'm going to make sure that that shape's fitting around the pin itself right now, the part that we rounded out, which I'm actually going to need to open that up a little bit. And again, this is thin, so you want to make sure you're keeping it hot. Don't just force it because it'll very quickly crack on you if you don't. Be careful with what you're doing. So I'm actually going to grab a piece of round stock just to help me fit this around the piece. I'm not going to grab a thicker piece of that. And that way it'll give me a little bit of a template of what to bend it around since my pin's still pretty warm. So you can see it's starting to fit pretty well, so we're going to heat it one more time. We're going to close it in, and then our blanket pin will be pretty much complete. Then we're just going to have to harden that file to make sure it's throwing good sparks. Now the bottom of the file has where it was broken, so all I'm really going to do for that is hit it with the grinder at the end when I grind the edge off. work that a little bit while it's still warm. Hot, hot. All right. So there's our finished, if I can hold it, finished blanket pin. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to heat this file up right here till it's yellow hot. I'm going to quench it in water to make it real hard. Then I'm going to hit it with the grinder a little bit and clean it up, cut off this bottom and stuff. And then once it's all finished up, we'll get another picture. I'll show you throwing in some sparks, and we'll show you a blanket with it being used. Alright guys, so we finished up the blanket pin, and basically what I did when I got back home was I sat and I took a file to it just to get a little bit cleaner look, a little bit more rustic of a look. So I'll show you that, how it ended up coming out. Alright, so I just wanted to finish this video up showing you two different things. First of all, like I said, we made a striker slash blanket pin all in one. So this thing does throw awesome sparks. Okay, so we have that functionality of this pin. To put the pin on, quite simple. All you would do is you're going to take your wool blanket, and we could do a longer video on this, but I just want to show you quick. You either throw it up over your head, or a lot of times I'll just throw it over my shoulders. And then basically you're going to take the pin part that we made and stick it through your blanket, and then fold your pin over and twist it around on itself. And then you have the pin that's going to hold your blanket in place, keep you warm. You can use it as outerwear, anything. So just make, it adds function to your wool blanket even further than it already is. So I want to thank you guys for joining me for this video. Stay tuned for more. Thanks guys.